All right, folks, this is a funny one. This is a funny one. This is a darkly comic one, but this will make you laugh. This is good for a laugh. So Marco Rubio just published an article in the Federalist boasting about his defense of free speech because he shuttered up an agency whose name I forget. To be honest with you, I'll find out along with you guys. It'll refresh my memory. You know, this is the kind of thing where like this reminds me of the early days of Trump term two, way back in January, February, where every time Doge slashed something, it's, oh, wow, they're taking on the deep state. This is that kind of thing. Rubio,
Oh, all those 2 months ago.
all those 2 months ago, feels like a lot longer than that. To protect free speech, the censorship industrial complex must be dismantled by Marco Rubio.
Oh,
Yes, he
Jesus
actually wrote
Christ.
this. During his historic comeback campaign in 2024, President Trump vowed to close the book on a dark chapter in America's constitutional history: the weaponization of America's own government to silence, censor, and suppress the free speech of ordinary Americans. I mean, could you believe this? The American people responded to this promise by giving President Trump a landslide victory last November. Everything this administration has done since then has been laser focused on fulfilling the promises made during that campaign. Today, it is my pleasure to announce the State Department is taking a crucial step towards keeping the president's promise to liberate American speech by abolishing forever the body formerly known as the Global Engagement Center. Yes, this sounds like the kind of thing we're going to hear. We're going to have to read, 50,000 Substack articles about what a great thing this is for free speech and what a great victory this is on certain outlets that I have a strong feeling will be very excited about this. Over the past half decades, bodies like GEC, crafted by our own governing ruling class, nearly destroyed America's long free speech history. The enemies of speech had new lingo to justify their authoritarian impulse. It was disinformation, allegedly pushed by nefarious foreign governments, that was the number one threat to our democracy. To protect our democracy, this disinformation had to be identified and stamped out. GEC's history shows the pernicious way Washington turns laudable public goals into a means of entrenching its own power and rolling back the freedom of regular Americans. No, not unlike what you guys are doing. Unlike unlike what you're overseeing. GEC began life in 2011 as the Center for Strategic Counterterrorism Communications. CSCC's purpose was to monitor the narratives of Al Qaeda and other terrorist organizations and advise the American government on what counter-terrorist narratives to use in response. But this worthy purpose didn't last long. In early 2016, the Obama administration renamed CSCC the Global Engagement Center, stripping away the explicit focus on international terrorism. Then, after Donald Trump's historic victory in 2016, but before he took office, GEC's mission was expanded to cover any and all foreign state and non-state propaganda and disinformation efforts. Ultimately, the problem wasn't that our government picked the wrong people and NGOs to police disinformation. The problem is that they were picking anybody to do this at all. The entire disinformation industry, from its very beginnings, has existed to protect the American establishment from the voices of forgotten Americans. Everything it does is the fruit of the poison tree. The hoax that Russian interference, misinformation, and meddling is what caused President Trump's victory in 2016, rather than a winning political message that only he was offering. He and not me, because I was a very, very outspoken opponent of his 2016 candidacy, got into numerous fights with him on the campaign trail. Oh, that didn't make the op-ed. This travesty has gone on long enough. Our republic is based on putting trust in the ordinary citizenry. Our founding fathers took the bold step of believing that ordinary citizens can sift through information, decide which policies and candidates are best, and vote accordingly. Well, interesting. You don't really seem to trust Americans to decide on issues of Israel-Palestine. You don't trust ordinary Americans to parse through that information and come to a decision. Finally, as we recommit this country to its core constitutional free speech principles at home. Again, folks, this is Marco Rubio, author of this op-ed. As we recommit this country to its core constitutional free speech principles at home, we will remain vigilant abroad. not just against threats from adversaries such as communist China, but also from less expected countries where authoritarian censorship is gradually strangling true freedom of speech. We are not afraid. At her birth, America was a lone beacon of freedom to the world. If necessary, we will happily be that lone beacon once again. Wow. Wow. I mean, the fucking balls. The balls to be bragging about what a free speech champion you are, as you are rounding people up for writing op-eds against Israel in college newspapers. Just unbelievable. Breaking.
Where the fuck do you get the balls?
Yeah. So Mike Benz was very impressed about this. Breaking, the U.S. State Department has just placed all 30 full-time staff at the Global Engagement Center's remnant known as RFIMI on leave, eliminating all 50 full-time staff positions, and delivered a notice to Congress ending RFMI's existence and $65 million in funding. Wow. Wow. He was so impressed by this, he actually interviewed Marco Rubio about this. Let's hear Mike Benz and Marco Rubio.
Is there any insights that you can provide to the American people about how the State Department is going to go about once again restoring free speech in a world where we are facing foreign threats from the European Union and Brazil and other places to Americans' ability to talk?
Yeah, so the first thing, obviously, is our number one priority is Americans. So we don't want to see an American who happens to be living in London or happens to be living in Europe post something online about American politics or any politics, and all of a sudden they're facing ramifications over there, or they're denied entry, and something happens.
What about Israeli politics?
Oh, we're denying them into our country.
Wow.
Or we're going to arrest them because they posted something while living overseas. So our number one interest is the impact it has on Americans. The broader point, which is the one I think the Vice President made very clear in Munich at the security conference, and people freaked out about what he said, but it's true. What is it that links us with Western Europe? What is it that links us with these? It's our shared values. And one of those shared values, we hope, is freedom of expression. I know they don't have a First Amendment, but freedom of expression, right?
Except for Zionism.
And if that is eroded, if suddenly these become places where people are targeted because of what they said or what their opinion is, then one of the pillars of our shared interest, beyond military cooperation, beyond anything else, is under attack. And I think he made a very vibrant point that in some ways you are attacking, by attacking freedom of expression, you are attacking one of the pillars of our shared interest, our shared culture, our shared values. And so I think we raise that.
Okay, now look, I want to be fair. That was only one clip of this interview. I did not seek out the whole thing to watch, but based on Mike Benz's gushing praise for Marco Rubio's gutting of this Global Engagement Center, I think it's safe to assume Mike Benz did not ask him about the hypocrisy of advocating for free speech while cracking down on the speech rights of students protesting against Israel. I'm almost positive Mike Benz raised no such point. If he did, I apologize in advance. But if he didn't, he should turn in his journalism card, because how can you possibly call yourself a serious journalist or commentator or activist in this space or whatever he calls himself and not raise that question? You just let him skate by on the, oh yeah, Vance told him straight in Munich. Like, how can you let him go through an interview without pressing him on that core, obvious hypocrisy? How can you do that? Again, if he did, I take it back. It's doubtful based on his tweets and this excerpt. And if Mike Benz didn't press him on it, this guy didn't press him on it. The Ben Shapiro Show welcomed Marco Rubio, who, continued his PR tour bragging about this great victory for freedom of speech.
This major move that you just made at the State Department, getting rid of a big chunk of the censorship bureaucracy that had been created and pushed a while back, but then exacerbated over the course of the last few years, hidden. What's the story with what you are doing over at the State Department to get rid of the body formerly known as the Global Engagement Center?
Yeah, I think you have to understand the history behind it. It's real brief. They started it by saying, Al-Qaeda, ISIS, all these terrible groups are radicalizing people online. We should do something about it. And, back when they came up with that 12 years ago, whatever it was, people are like, whatever makes sense. And then it metastasized. And it's like, oh, there's foreign interference in our elections. We need to start going after that. Well, then by 2020, it became a movement to go after voices inside of American politics and begin to label people. And they put a guy in charge who basically was going around saying Trump speaks just like these foreign terrorists. His supporters speak just like these foreign terrorists. So now you have an individual running a State Department entity that was labeling American speech by Americans as foreign interference. And then really the kicker was not only were they doing all that formally from the State Department, but they were taking State Department money and they were giving it to these third-party groups who were supposed to be like independent, verified arbiters of what's true and what isn't, what's good and what's bad. And these groups were deliberately targeting. I believe you were one of the ones they targeted. I think the Federalists began putting labels on people. Now, you may say, okay, well, what's the importance of label? Well, that's not just the issue here. The issue is not only did they put labels on people, that was then used to go to social media companies. It was used to go to outlets and say, you have to deplatform these people, or you have to cut back on how much views they're getting. You have to go after them. In essence, silence them. So in essence, it metastasized and the metamorphosis into a government-run entity that was targeting political speech in America, labeling it disinformation, and silencing it.
Okay. So, by the way, it looks like he gave that interview at the same time, more or less, that he gave the Benz interview, since if you look, the same background. Yeah. Pivot the camera. Yeah, the same flags in the background. So on a tour bragging about this. And yes, he mentioned in his op-ed in the Federalist that the reason he published it there is because they were a target of the GEC. Apparently, he claims Shapiro was a target as well, which is exactly what we said the free speech stance of the Trump crew would be. They are going to defend the speech rights of their allies to express pro-conservative speech, and they're going to crack down on the liberal organizations that seek to infringe upon their rights. I would take that somewhat seriously. In fact, for years under the Biden regime, we did take that very seriously. We've advocated for conservatives' free speech rights on multiple occasions on this show. But in this context, the hypocrisy is just so obscene. As Beando points out, it's almost funny that this is their angle when the Trump administration is actively disappearing people for holding differing opinions. Connor says Ben Shapiro is literally talking to the guy who is helping imprison and deport people who disagree with the U.S.'s foreign policy of genocide. But since he agrees with it, he's going to deflect to Biden censoring people when he has the chief censor of our time right there with him. Exactly. The Khalil case alone, and there have been many others like it. And now they're talking about going after people, who advocate for deportees and things like that, what they can nail them for. This is the most hostile administration to free speech in my lifetime already, 3 months in. Worse than Bush, and yes, worse than Biden already. The Khalil case, for those who do not understand the magnitude of that, as I've said repeatedly, that is an automatic fail. That is making a left into oncoming traffic on a road test. Once you do that, you surrender your right to advocate for free speech with any modicum of seriousness. And Marco Rubio is the guy who came out and said Rumeysa Ozturk doesn't have a right to be here. He admitted, or his State Department has recently admitted, they found no evidence of any criminality or even any anti-Semitism against her at all. Their evidence was the op-ed that she wrote in a school paper about divestment from Israel on behalf on the part of Tufts University. So for a guy like that to now take a victory lap because he's defunding some $65 million agency is just obscene and absurd. And yeah, anybody who makes a big deal of this as if it's a big victory for free speech, you're also fucking obscene and absurd.
Yeah, this is exactly what we said was going to happen. We spoke out about a lot of this. This is touching on a lot of the Taibbi reporting, a lot of Schellenberger's reporting, and yeah, they did have these ratings agencies that were shutting down speech. I think there are very few people, especially people who make money on this space, who are willing to go the Whitney Webb route of acknowledging no one wants to give you free speech There are no good guys. There are no champions of free speech. Sure, Plaskett and Wasserman Schultz trying to defend your speech? Absolutely not. Neither are these people.
Of course.
They're not defending your speech. We saw J.D. Vance go up there in Europe, only talk about this kind of woke crackdown on speech, talk about pro-life protesters being rousted, saying nothing about all of the journalists that have been arrested for their reporting on Palestine, particularly in England. Said not a word about it. To see them go up there and start talking about the Digital Information Center, I forget the exact name of it, Countering Digital Hate.
The Digital
Center
Services
for
Act.
Countering Digital Hate, I think it was called. To go up there and talk about that when you're daily disappearing students and you are asserting that you have a right to deny the constitutional rights guaranteed in this country to all people within its borders.
Yes.
You have a right to deny that to student protesters by definition. And then to go and start crying about a story that broke, 3 years ago at this point with the Twitter files, as if this is really the pressing issue of our times. And hey, I agree with it in principle, but when you put it in this context, it's profane and it's such an obvious cover for what they're actually doing. When I saw Matt at Rescue the Republic, I asked him this question. You can find that video online from an interview that we did with him. And I said, but don't you think these guys, once they get in power, they're just, we grew up with the conservatives being the censors. And Matt said, well, then we'll fight them if that's what happens. And hey, man, he has been dropping some articles showing timelines on Khalil and that kind of thing. But I think for people like Taibbi, like Schellenberger, who have reported a lot on what Rubio is talking about here, it's going to put them in a difficult position because on the one hand, you're vindicated and validated, right? After all of these years of, the Democrats sending the IRS to your house and shit. But at the same time, if a bunch of fucking monsters who are committing abuses against freedom of speech that is as severe and arguably, I'd say actually inarguably more severe than the thing you reported on. Yeah, I mean,
they're putting people in jail.
They're putting people in torture prisons. So
well, that's on the MS-13. I'm talking about just in terms of the anti-Israel speech. I mean, yes, but Mahmoud Khalil is in jail. Ozturk is in jail. They haven't just been deported. They're being held while their case is heard. They're in fucking prison while their babies are being born.
Right. So at that point, are you going to keep talking about how Nina Jankowicz sang like Julie Andrews?
Exactly.
Like, is that really what we're going to focus on now? And if you are focusing on that now, I mean, your audience captured. And in the case of someone like Mike Benz, okay, that's not an op. That guy who actually worked in the State Department, you don't think this fucking guy is an op?
Yeah.
Very much like
Fed vibes from that guy.
Very much like Kash Patel, where, they'll give you half-truths about the dark goings-on in the deep state, but it's all oriented towards one side. It's all oriented toward, these crazy libs and Rockefeller people, and they're running the deep state, telling you absolutely nothing about the very scary techno-feudal overlords that they actually work for. Mike Benz is a pure op. Ben Shapiro, obviously Zionist fanatic, and frankly, probably also an op. We last night on Revolutionary Blackout Network, Nick had a story about how they hacked 4chan.
Right.
And it showed how Israel is planting a lot of this divisive content on 4chan that supposedly is organic from all the incels, and also people with .gov email addresses here. So much of what you see in this space is an op. A lot of these people are being run by the same people they claim to be exposing.
Yep. And speaking of Schellenberger here, Rubio uses Schellenberger's language, censorship industrial complex. That's what Schellenberger writes all the time. This guy here, I pulled the slide since we still had it saved. No evidence linking tough student to anti-Semitism or terrorism, State Department office found. No evidence linking her, not just to terrorism, to anti-Semitism. No evidence of anti-Semitism. They arrested her in the street and now are keeping her in jail. She was just denied bond today, by the way.
Yes. I'm sorry, man.
I'm sorry. You cannot compare deplatforming someone from Facebook to this. We're against them both strongly. We spent years speaking out against it. We've covered the Twitter files extensively. We interviewed Matt about his reporting, which I thought was excellent and valuable. But if you can't tell the difference between that and this, you're no longer to be taken seriously. I'm sorry. This has crossed a line beyond even that.
Right. And this is where I say, like, look, I'm almost bracing myself because I'm hoping it doesn't happen. I am really hoping a bunch of articles coming from Matt. Schellenberger, I don't have as much of a personal investment in. I am very much hoping Matt does not drop an article tomorrow about how Marco Rubio is putting the Center for Countering Digital Hate on the run now. Yeah, with all of this going on. I'm really
I dread the thought.
I hope I don't get that in my inbox. I really do.
Please clap.